Hello, guys. David Vos here. Oh, buddy, it's been a warm day in Alabama, and my air conditioner doesn't work. I guess it's brand new. Everything in this place is brand new, but I'm having a couple of troubles with things here, and I hope they're going to come out and fix that before summer really starts blazing, because it gets really warm down here in Alabama. But we got everything we need here. Everything's wonderful. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Well, guys, wanted to get back on here and talk more about what we've been talking about. Oh, man, oh, wow. To be able to understand all of this is just mind-boggling. I know, people have been trying to understand this. I mean, ever since Adam walked out of the garden, it says he was naming the animals. So it's a symbol of the fact that he was trying to understand. And his son or great-grandson, Enoch, is supposed to have written a great book. But if you really look into it, you find out that he wrote the book on the scroll of the heavens. And this is why the scroll is going to be rolled up, because it's words. It's the words of the great Hermes Trismegistus, or as they call him in Greek. And this is where we were talking about yesterday, the hermaphrodite, because Hermes is married to Aphrodite. Africans wear afros. So in the story, we always see this androgynous being. This is part of the whole thing, getting back to that original place. So we were talking about the Egyptians yesterday, talking about their deities and their cosmologies and so forth. And we were saying that it's really kind of the opposite. These are what we would call, I guess, the mysteries. What are the mysteries? But they're the opposite of the Babylonian mysteries. I don't want to go, intricately in depth as to why there's these two. We talked about that yesterday and some other times. But you see, what it appears is that the Egyptian mysteries were originally the correct mysteries that they carried on from the great Atlantis or the days of Enoch before the flood. And the great Atlantis, we know that this Atlantis was an amazing place, and obviously they built these huge pyramids, and they had all this great wisdom. Some of these pyramids may have survived the flood. But you see, we have this little thing that might help us understand a little bit about the original teachings. We know there's various setups. There's various, patterns that you can follow. And the major two patterns are these mysteries that you find in Babylon and Egypt. Everything in Babylon, where the Judeans went down as captives for 70 years and came out blinded, as the Apostle Paul says, because they began to believe in the lies of the ego. The fleshly nature began to believe in the God at the bottom of the wheel, who blinds the minds of the unbelievers, and they began to worship their deity that was in the darkness. But what really is all this? Is it evil really to worship the God at the bottom of the wheel? Are you a bad person if you do that? Not if you know what you're doing. Because you see, followers of truth they're not afraid of anything. Because you see, we understand that we are the authority. We are, just like our Father in heaven and our grandmother is the creator, we are also procreators. And the only way we can create is through love. So there's never any danger, and you don't have to be worried or be afraid. Be afraid of fear itself, as the wise ones say. Because when you are afraid, because you don't want to know, because you're scared, because you might do something wrong, well, then you're assuming that the universe is evil. And when you do that, you simply get what you believe. Because you are the the vehicle for the light and the temple of the divine being. So never worry about, investigating or learning, because when your heart is pure and true, you call upon the Father of heaven and earth and the divine Holy Spirit. She will teach you all things you need to know. You have no need to be afraid, because our Father in heaven loves you. And Jesus says, if you will just go unto the Father yourself, He will give you anything you could even ask, because you don't need someone to go and ask for you. Jesus said, I could go and ask for you, but you don't need that, because the Father Himself loves you. So please, friends, don't be afraid to look into these mysteries, because the Apostle Paul mentioned the mysteries, and he talked about the mysteries, and he mentioned two different mysteries. There's no fear, but we do have to become aware. We do have to be conscious of the fact that some things are not wise. We're not under law, friends, but not all things are advantageous. See, all things are lawful, but see, not everything is very wise thing to do. You're perfectly lawful. It's perfectly lawful for you to just jump off a cliff. I mean, there's no law that says thou shalt not jump off a cliff. But we wouldn't want to do that. And you see, there's no danger of us jumping off a cliff, because we love life. The only reason that you might have any fear is if you start getting scared, then you start to tremble, and you're not able to even guide your own self anymore. You're not in control, and you could slip and fall. So the most important thing is to always know who you are and identify with who you really are, that place within you, that spiritual man that is the only begotten one of the Father, who sits at the right hand of power and has all authority, both in heaven and on earth. So, how are we going to figure out all of this information? We've got all these gods and goddesses, and people are calling this syncretism, right? To synchronize all of the ancient teachings from every nation and put them all together. Well, you can actually do that, all right? And here's how I would recommend you begin. Go and get just go on the internet and look up the Sumerian deities. Look up the Babylonian deities. Look up the Greek ones, the Latin, the Egyptian. Now, you'll read the Sumerian deities, in Nana and Enki and Inanna and Utu and Enlil and Ninurta and stuff like this. You're like, well, I don't know who these are. How am I going to figure this out? This makes no sense. Oh, and then I'm looking at the Babylon, and that's just the same thing. Stuff I don't know. Sin and Nabu and Ishtar and Samus and Nergal and Marduk and Ninurta again. And some of these names are overlapping, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. And okay, well, let's move on to the Greek. Selene and Hermes and Aphrodite and Helios and Ares and Zeus and Kronos. And, well, this makes no sense. It's just all these words, and it means nothing. Here's how we'll do it. We know the names of all the planets in English. The moon, the sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Well, you see, those names are almost identical to the ones we find in Latin. And this is the reason. Because the last world empire was the Roman Empire, and it's still basically in power. I mean, the Vatican is still holding sway. So our English language is very closely related to the Latin by virtue of the fact, the meanings, you see. Not necessarily the spellings, not really any different than Spanish, German, or anybody else. But the Roman Latin is the way we translated the Greek scriptures. We translated it into Latin. So they had to find near translations for these words. And this is why, and because Greek was right before the Latin. So we can go back to the Latin and synchronize those deities with the English very easily. Because in Latin, the only difference in Latin and in English is really the sun and the moon. Because we say sun and they say sol in Latin. And they say Luna, but we say moon. But most of us know that Sol is the sun and Luna is the moon. So we got that. So we got Luna. Mercury is Mercury. Venus is Venus. Sol is the sun. Mars is Mars. Jupiter is Jupiter. Saturn is Saturn. We've got it. Okay, now take a look at the Greek deities. Now, they don't say Luna and they don't say moon. They say Selena. All right. We keep that in mind. That's easy enough. And then they say Hermes for Mercury. All right. We've been saying that. So Hermes and Mercury is the same person, whoever this is. Venus and Aphrodite. So Greek is Aphrodite. Latin is Venus. So our planet Venus was Aphrodite to the Greeks. Instead of Sol or the sun, now we have Helios. And the Mars they called Aries. That's a slight difference, but we know that one because we have that astrological age of Aries that matches our springtime Mars. What we call Jupiter, they called Zeus. That's pretty simple. And what we call Saturn, they called Kronos. Now, from the Greek deities, we can synchronize the Babylonian. And from there, we can synchronize the Sumerian. But this is how we're able to go step by step and figure out all these individuals. But now that we have these deities all the way up to Latin, and I guess you could say English, who are they really? Because we've got this book called the Bible that has these 10 deities or 10 patriarchs from Adam to Noah. Interesting number there, 10, because this great beast or the world, right, the carnal nature of this earth has 10 horns. And that is appropriate. Sometimes in mythologies they use multiples of 10. Sometimes these beasts have 100 heads or 1,000 heads. But they all represent the totality of all of the powers that be. So, in order to really understand this, we've got to go back to the original mysteries, the Egyptian. Now, how would we know which one of these Egyptian deities to match up with the English ones? Well, actually, there's a little trick. See, that's what makes it so beautiful. First of all, yes, it's difficult to find because you'd have to scour you might take a person years to figure out where to look for this information. But if by some chance somebody tells you where to look, it becomes a lot easier. Well, you're in luck. I'll explain what you can do to get this down further. All right, go to the Egyptian deities. There's lots of them, all right? But we're going to figure out which of these deities we can use to synchronize, right, or to compare the same 10 individuals, because remember, we only showed 7 a minute ago, but there are more. After we get to Saturn, we find there's Uranus. That's a Greek god as well, and we can correlate that as well. And then we have Neptune, which in Greek is Poseidon, that's the sea. And then we have, beyond that, we have Pluto. And as we said, Pluto is the Latin way of saying Apollo, which is destruction. It's in the Bible. The son of destruction is coming. So we'll talk about all that. But in the Egyptian, they have what they call, sometimes they call them the 9 deities, and sometimes they call them 10. Because in most places where they enumerate these, they call them the Enneads. They usually just mention 9, but then they go like an afterthought. Oh yeah, well there's one more. There's 10. Well, there's your 10, the Enneads. And they name them, and you can figure out pretty much in quite distinguishing detail what these deities are. And this is really going to help us. So, because there's other deities in the Egyptian, but we're just looking at these first 10. So the first one in the Enneads, the chief of all of the great beings, the one who created it all or made it all or is it all or, the one, okay, it's called Atum. You've probably heard the old saying, I think somebody some guy over in Australia that we talk about all the time is always talking about atum. All is atum. And he correlates that with the word Adam. Yeah, the word Adam that's inside you. And also Adam, or the first man, woman, the first being. So, you see, human beings are called Adam, but they're called lots of things. All the humans that had life, his children were all humans. They all had characteristics of what it means to be human. But what it means to be human is something very odd. It's like it's not just one thing, because we are the all. We started off in the Adam, in the plural, Adim, male and female, made he them. We had it all, both the negative and the positive, the up and the down, the left and the right. We were the atom. All is atom. Because everything is made of this one thing, the monad, which is a whole, a complete whole with the male and the female. So the first deity in the Egyptian is Atum, and that would correspond to Adam. Remember, there's going to be 10 because it goes from Adam to Noah. So the first one is Adam, and he is the monad, the real, whole, complete existence, the being. His son was Shu. Shu represented the land. It was also characterized as a lion. So we start the whole wheel at times. If you look in Egypt, they started all off with the lion, right? The Sphinx. It's got this lion-looking Sphinx. Well, it starts off in Leo there. And then the next one is the Virgin, and there's the virgin birth, and then we start going downward. Mankind went, and they had the great fall. It's all represented all throughout the Bible in various places. The fall of man, right, going downward into sin. But we also have, when Jesus was born, we have his mother, a virgin, the Virgo, born in Bethlehem, or the house of bread, which is the Virgo. And that starts at the descending side of the wheel as it goes down into the darkness. Now, that is, like the Israelites went down into Egypt. So that's down. And there's a lot of marshes and alligators down there. Of course, they're going to meet an alligator or a beast, and it's going to eat them, and there's going to be all kinds of snakes, and there's going to be troubles, and desert land, and then the storms are going to come, and it's going to be a trial, because this is what man is. We're here to learn. We're on a journey. We're going to go around the circle. Jason and the Argonaut, he's looking for this, golden fleece. Right? And in his boat, he's got Hercules who can bind the serpents. And Perseus is coming on his white horse. All the characters are in the boat. And it's all inside of you, my friends. So you've got the Lord right inside of you. You are the temple of the living deity. But what nobody's ever told you is you're also the temple of everything. Because you are all. And everything you want to be. And the seven dwelleth in the one. Because they are all children of the one. So Shu is the land. It's a little bit similar to Genesis 1. The first thing we find after the beginning, right, Elohim, which is plural, is this separation of light and darkness, land and water, and all of this. Well, this is kind of what's sort of a different story to explain the same thing, the creation or the manifestation of the all. Okay? So first we have the land, then we go, and now that might correspond to Atlas or other various deities and other, but we won't get into the correspondences so much here. So the next one is Tifnut. Tifnut. I'm not sure how to pronounce it because I'm not Egyptian. And, this is a dead language. But we have the letters, it looks like Tefnut. And as we said, many of these letters seem to be like silent. So Nut could be nu. And it has some sort of connection to Anu, or An, or heaven. So Tifnut is also was married to Shu. They were like partners. And so Tifnut is said to be the water. The pure water. Well, now this is interesting. We got water and land now. Then we come down to Geb. Now, okay, and Tifnut then would be in Greek, would be, in Latin, it would be the Neptune. That's that planet out there. Now, so Atum as a whole is also called the Virgin Mother at times, okay? So we got the great Virgin out there in the furthest extremity. Then we're coming closer and we get to what appears to be some hazy form, some formation. We'll call that land. Then it starts, we start distinguishing other shapes that can be moved around. Fluid, right? We can change these things. So this is Neptune, and he rules over the sea, the water. And Greek is Poseidon. And then we come down to Geb. Geb is the earth, not the land or the dry stability of the dryness of the earth or the desert land or or just the soil, right? But this is the earth. And so it's Mother Earth. It's a woman. It's a female. In Greek, they may call it Gaia. In the Sumerian, it was Ki. But they have this Ki. This is pretty much in every language, Mother Earth. The next one, of course, is the sky, which would be, in this case, Father Sky, Heavenly Father. And Nut, as we said, maybe Nu or An. That may correspond in the Sumerian to Asher or these types of words. Now, Rhea, perhaps, remember, Zeus looked down at Rhea. Well, Rhea, if it's the sky, Zeus had a relationship with the sky and brought forth children. And Zeus, you see, is right after this Nu, the Nut. Zeus is Greek, Rhea is Greek, but now as we're saying, we're talking about the Egyptian, Nut. So instead of Zeus, they have Osiris. Osiris is like, nobody fully and completely understands what this Osiris is. They say it's fertility. Sometimes it looks like sometimes you'll see where it'll say it's the whole heaven. It means the heaven. And other times they're saying it means fertility. Well, Osiris's wife, Isis, is the same as Eve because it means life. Now we've got something to do with life. And Osiris, what is Osiris? Osiris is some sort of fertility, rebirth. Remember the whole idea that Osiris is resurrected. And that's not Jesus, by the way. That's Osiris, which was, remember Jesus resurrected his father, Osiris, Lazarus. Lazarus in the parable of the Bible is the one that went to paradise. He died, and the rich man went to hell. And there was a great gorge that you couldn't pass. This was the afterlife. This is the story, the Egyptian story of Osiris, which in the Greek they called Orion. That's the first constellation in the spring that comes up out of the dewat and is resurrected. So Osiris is this fertility god, and the counterpart would be Zeus. Remember, Zeus had a thunderbolt. He was from the sky. And maybe Anshar is probably the Sumerian Babylonian term for that. Because An is heaven and Shar, or Sar, is the same as this Osiris, Osara, Lazarus. The Zars, the Khazars. And Zar then came to mean ruler, but it really was one of the original deities. After Osiris, of course, we have Isis, we've talked about. That means life. Her counterpart in the Sumerian is Kishar. I was saying that wrong yesterday. I was saying Anshar. I don't know why I said that. It's Kishar, because Ki means earth, and Shar means ruler. So Kishar is the earthly ruler. And the one thing you have to understand is sometimes it's not as simple as you think. So you say, well, earthly ruler, Kishar, maybe that's Mother Earth, but there seems to be several of these Mother Earths and Mother Heavens and stuff. So we had to be more specific. Sometimes somebody thinks some god is the moon, you think, but it's not really the moon. Maybe it's just the new moon, or another one's the full moon, or one's the blazing sun as it's setting. See, and the other one is the sun that's rising and rebirth. So they're different. Sometimes these words don't even mean what we think they do. Sometimes we think a word, like sometimes we think Ra means the sun. But you see, even in English, Ra doesn't mean the sun. Ra is ray. It's just a ray of the sun. It really means the light. See? And our Father dwells in unapproachable light. In fact, the New Testament says, our Father in heaven is light. And therefore, the New Testament is telling you that our Father in heaven is Ra. The original Father, who is far, 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 far above everyone, who is the first of the Enneads, who is the Atum, who is Adam, and that is our deity. You know? So these 10, we're going to find out, are the 10 patriarchs, Adam, and of course they all had wives. So after Isis, we have Set. Again, difficult to pin it down. Some people say that Set's the moon. There's some indication that he's got something to do with the moon. But he's not really the moon, and he's not the sun, and he's not really, they call him the desert sometimes. They call him the storm. Well, you get a little better idea when you look at his counterpart, the word typhon. The Egyptians also used the word typhon for this. We have this word today, typhoon. It's like a great storm, like a hurricane. Well, so Set was always considered violent, like a storm, death, desert dry as opposed to wet and rebirth. So Set is things that we might think are bad, right? But then he's giving birth to children that we need, ourselves, part of ourselves. You see, because we're all one body, and every body, we're all a member of this body. Every one of us. And the body needs every member, like Paul says, even the toe. But Set is very important because he's not just some particular planet or something, but he's a whole force of nature, one of the original 10 forces that made the universe. We can't do without that because we need the universe. So, Typhon, when a storm comes through, what happens? Is it like unnecessary? No. When the storms come through on a hot day, like, when it's scorching in the summer, you say, well, summertime, everything should be fine. Yeah, but sometimes summer, especially in Egypt, certain parts of the world can get pretty hot and scorches the crops, and then you don't have any food. They call that famine. So it's not always good to have sunshine. Sometimes it's better to be in the winter because you need both. Sometimes you need darkness. Why? Because you need to sleep. So all of these things are necessary. Now, that does not mean that we need evil. Because you see, when you take these things back to their, all the way to the end of the calculation that you would make, like negative and positive, we'll say up and down and left and right and life and death, all these opposites. Ultimately, you get back to the ultimate opposites, which is existence and non-existence. Okay, so ultimately, the negative doesn't really exist. It's only an illusion in our minds. But this illusion takes on a character. It's part of us that we'll sort of grow out of at some point because we'll move on. But we'll always have some aspect of it. You always have to have a little bit negative to push off from to know what the positive is. You never know the sweet until you've tasted the bitter. It's going to be an eternal principle. Just for that reason, we have a symbol that represents that in English, and it's a zero. You say, why do you need a symbol that represents nothing? If it's nothing, we don't need a symbol for it. Well, we have a symbol for it because we have to understand it so that we know that we are something. So that's what this is all about. This is just symbols. And there's nothing wrong with any of these beings. And Jesus wasn't Set, nor was he really Horus. But what Jesus was saying, because remember, Jesus in the book of Revelation says, I am Amun. I have the 7 stars in my hand. What is he saying he's Amun for? Amun is like, it was the invisible one. No one even, Amun was so powerful. I mean, Ra was obviously powerful. It was the beginning of all, right? But then there was this Amun. It was so mysterious because it was invisible, but it had so much power. And you couldn't find it, you couldn't see it, but they had a word for it. Amun. What is that? The wind. Spirit. Okay, so that's why eventually they had another little word where they combined Ra and Amun, and they'd say Amun Ra. Whole buddy, now we're talking something that's not only powerful, light, but it's invisible. And that's the most powerful thing in the universe. So when Jesus said, I am Amun, I am the Amen, that's what we say at the end of our prayers. Why? Because every one of our prayers is going to go into that sanctuary behind the veil, into the deepest recess of our subconscious mind. And when it reaches it with intent, it always carries out the intentions. It is powerful. It is where the universe comes out of this one thing, the power that manifests everything. And that's the invisible. That's the spirit. That's the real world, the mind. So Ra is the light or the illumination in the sense of being able to see, but the wind is the essence of that. So you see, there are different deities which may be aspects of the one. This is why you can never really say that the divine being is this or that. It's not male, it's not female, it's not up, it's not down. It's everything, it's the all, it's the complete Atum, the Amun Ra. And Ra and Atum are the same, they're counterparts. But, so we need Set. Jesus wasn't, sometimes you might think if you're reading the story that, because Set was fighting with Horus. So you think, well, Jesus is Horus then, because, Horus was resurrected. See, no, what Jesus was saying is, I am the all. You are the all. But the all is going to use the vehicle that he has available to him, the body. And when we're in the body, we're going to ride it like a vehicle to get someplace. We're not identifying with the outer body. We're the inside. We're the Amun Ra, the Atum. But Jesus had to partake of flesh and blood, as did his brethren, to overcome the world. To be the arbitrator between Horus and Set, he had to become Horus, or I should say he had to become Thoth. Because Thoth is thought of as logos by the Neoplatonic individuals. Thoth was what I think the word thought. Logos is logic. Thoth was the Egyptian deity who was spirit, who had not really manifested on the earth in any particular, he's not the word in his existence as Thoth. He's not a person on the earth. Because remember, Jesus was both man and God, right? So he had to be the go-between. He had to be the arbitrator between the death and the life, between the spirit and the flesh, between the scorching sun and the snow and the winter and the cold. He had to arbitrate or else we'd die. But you see, we can't do without the cold. The rain comes down to water things. We need that. But the sun comes out to give light. But you can't have too much sun. Can't have too much water, you'll flood. So the arbitrator in the middle was Thoth, and he represents wisdom. He was, like writing wisdom words. He wrote all the words and all the information. So he was the spokesman for the gods. He was the one who explained it all. He was the consciousness, the awareness of all these things. And so, of course, Jesus is going to be that consciousness that's going to understand and arbitrate between the two sides to make a decision that we might become like God. And to know the difference between right and wrong is to be that arbitrator, is to be that inner spiritual man, the Thoth, the mind, the Logos, the Christ. So then we have, so Jesus is not a typhon. He doesn't come in and blow and storm and destroy everything. He's not Seth. Jesus is not any of these deities per se. But the sun in Horus, I want to say this. People are all talking about the Eye of Osiris and the Eye of Horus. And they don't realize they're talking about two different eyes. You see, Horus is the sun, or has to do with the sun, or the consciousness, okay, that is the light, makes the light, or the conscious mind. It's very powerful, and it can blaze so hot it can kill you, and the mind can kill you. So the eye of Osiris is the sun. So, I should say Ra. Ra isn't just the sun. Ra is the light, rays, right? The enlightenment, okay? But he has an eye. This mind, Ra, the mind, or light, okay, enlightenment, has an eyeball, a way to understand and peer into the conscious world, and that's the sun. Okay, so Set is the sun that sets and goes down over the horizon. And in that sense, that is the eye of Horus, not of Ra, but of Horus. And and that might be the moon. The eye is the moon. Now, the moon isn't Horus, but the eye of Horus is the moon. Because Horus has to go down into the underworld. He dies. He has to overcome it. And it says that they were wrestling. Set and Horus were wrestling. And I guess Set poked out Horus's eye. So one of his eyes was poked out, and they say that's why the moon is not as bright as the sun. So the two eyes is the sun and the moon. And I think that's very interesting. So again, you get the impression, the idea that these symbols are telling us about everything, not just 10 men who existed in the ancient times. Although, and this is where a lot of people have trouble, they want to make it either or. You see, all of these parables are about the universe, the science of the universe. But the names we all have today. When I was born, my mother and dad called me David. All right? Now, everybody gets a name when they're born. And most of the time, we like to name ourselves after our dad. Right? My dad's name was David. Well, the reason we do that is a tradition. The kings, you see, we're all like a king to our household. We're all like a tiny little unit, a monad, a father, a mother, and the children. And so we want to name ourselves after our fathers to keep the genealogy. Why? Because it's a tradition. The kings would act out the part of creation because the same way that you make the entire world is the same way that you continue to make the world. Because the world never was made in time or in some place. The universe is everywhere and for all eternity. It's a constant manifestation. And so we're always doing it. And so Jesus is always here. Because we're all one in Jesus. We're all going to act out. We're going to do greater works than he did. Okay? But just like you have a place when you're, 12 that you feel like, you're becoming a man, or you're 18, you're on your own now, or you're 30. We have these mile markers. And you yourself are going through these. You yourself. You're an actual person. So the world or the universe has the same, you can understand the universe the same way. There are certain aspects. The universe has, it's not in time, but in theory, in practice, as symbology goes, there are some aspect of the universe like a little baby. There's an aspect of the universe like a full-grown man. It's all happening, not in time, but it's manifesting. The source isn't the beginning of time, but it's the beginning in the sense of your source. So that beginning is everywhere. It's in the center of you. So I'm just pointing out that we have to be careful when we identify one of these deities with Jesus, because sometimes Jesus says he's Amun, and he's just saying, I identify with that. We all have to identify. Jesus had to identify with the devil too. Now, but I caution, that doesn't mean Jesus is the devil. See, we're not saying that Satan and Jesus are the same. They're not. One is dark, one is light. Well, there's a difference there. And if you don't believe me, to go down, into a room with no windows and shut off the light, and then turn the light back on. Tell me there ain't a difference. Okay, same thing with good and bad. Brother, there's a difference. And Jesus was good. He was all good. He was the arbitrator of good and evil. He had to come into the world which was evil. And he had to heal it. He said, bring them all, the lame and the blind, bring them to me. Oh yeah, even Set has to come down and bow down before him. Set's going to eventually learn. But who is Set? Well, he's that part, that earthly, ignorant part, the dark part that's learning, that needs help, that's separated from his wife. Right? He's going to have a daughter that's going to be able to become married to the northern kingdom, and then through this marriage, through the experiences of death and the experiences of life, we know good and evil, and we become like God. We incorporate both sides. We experience the evil, but we are not the evil. We are not even the good. Okay? The good is something we do. We are the mind, the atum. We are not the evil that we do. Therefore, don't worry. If you've made mistakes, forgive yourself. Move on. Okay? So now we go to Nephites. She is represented as the consort of Set once or twice. But she didn't like Set too much because, you see, the whole story here is about death and life and separating and being aware and being conscious, going from the all to the many, right? And then back to the all again. So she is saying, I have learned. I am the more spiritual part. And I have been with the darkness. And now I am deciding to choose the light. Now, the darkness will continue to live. There will always be a desert out there. We might need the desert for something. Just, we're not going to marry it, okay? It has a purpose, but we're not going to marry it. There will always be. Hell will always exist. It's eternal. The Bible says hell has flames that are not quenched and the worm does not die. What does that mean? It means that a worm, which is in the flesh, talking about maggots, they corrupt the flesh. They break it down and it goes back to the ground. See, it's corruption. So in the hell, we're in an eternal corruptible state. We go round and round and round. We can't die. You know, they'll seek death, but they'll not find it for 5 months at the bottom of the wheel. Right? From Scorpio unto the birth of Christ. The 5 months down there from Scorpio. That's the 5 months, ultimately. And it doesn't mean that Yahweh's not going to try and, fulfill these literally. Because there is the literal fulfillment that must take place. All things must be fulfilled, not one jot or tittle. So in no wise pass from the law until all things be fulfilled. That means the entire Torah, the prophets, and everything that's ever been written will be fulfilled. But it only has to be fulfilled once, and it only has to be filled briefly. So that's why the Great Tribulation is coming. Because everything has to happen in its time. There's a time to be alive. There's a time to die, friends. But if you are faithful, you'll get your crown and that white robe. And boy, we're gonna be so happy in eternal felicity and in happiness and love. It's going to be beautiful. So Nephites is part of the mourning, funerary, kind of morbid type yearning for truth. And this is the person who sees the Lord and says, oh Lord, if you had just been here, my father Osiris, Osiris, wouldn't have died. Right? The spiritual being inside of me, the Anshar, the light, wouldn't have died. And Jesus says, don't worry, it's not dead. It's just sleeping. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will never die. So you see, the illusion of death is always there. But when we wake up, when we recognize the Christ, we realize the being and not all the doing and not all the characters that we play. So then we go down to the 10th. And this is the 10th king, or the 10 horns. And that one is Horus. And Horus That's our word hours, right? So again, people say, well, Horus is the sun. No, no, no. Horus has a eye. Horus is the sky. His counterpart could be like Chronos, which is chronology, time. Anu, annual. And Horus, hours. That all has to do with time. But the eye that he sees the world is the sun. But that's not him. The sun is not him. He is the being. So all of these 7 are simply manifestations of the one atom, the atum. And so, when we're looking at the book of Revelation, guys, it's a little bit tricky. You have to be very, very aware of this, that there are more than one fulfillment. The one that we're looking at right now is the literal one because it has been prophesied. Yahweh has prophesied that he is going to try and fulfill all these, bring it to pass. So you see right now that Russia is invading the Ukraine. Friends, that's nothing. That's nothing, right? That's not going to do any, that's not going to cause as much trouble as you might think. What's going to happen is, right now, Israel is watching this very carefully because they want a one world government. And they know that the only way they can have this one world government prophesied by Yahweh, the laws of Yahweh and you must obey, right? You can't buy or sell without the mark of the beast. You must obey the government, right? That beast that's in Hosea 13, which is the beast that is in Revelation 13. Because the beast in Hosea has a leopard, a bear, and a lion. And it's the same animal characteristics we see there in Revelation 13. And the same as the ones there in Daniel. And these represent these natures that have become embodied in our government, in our own ways and laws and thinking. It's the illusion, this government that we're under right now, that's keeping us down. But you see, we're not aware of that yet. We've got to wake up. And that's what's happening right now. That's why we're having this particular judgment. I was telling somebody the other day, the word in the New Testament for judgment is crises. We have that word today, crisis. And when you get to a point where you have a crisis, you have to make a decision. And that's where we're at. That's why it's not really judgment in the sense somebody's going to judge us. Jesus said, I'm not going to judge you. I don't condemn you. That's what the word condemn means, to judge. In that sense, Jesus is not coming to judge anyone. Absolutely not. He's simply coming to save us. And we're going to see him coming on the clouds of heaven in a mind. We're going to have understanding, and he's got that sword of the Spirit out of his mouth. And he turns the waters into blood. You know, the waters of truth, right? He changes it into wine. He gives you, happiness. But the waters that we were drinking before were stagnant, right? They didn't give us life. So, this thing with Russia, the Israelis know that the only way that they're ever going to get what they think is their destiny is because they're looking at it all literal, not realizing there are other fulfillments to come, the spiritual ones. And not understanding that there is no way to please the earthly kingdom. There's nothing but death. There's no way out of this world. Jesus said you will not get out from thence until you've paid the uttermost farthing, the last penny. And they just haven't figured that out yet. But the flesh will eventually figure out, this ego will eventually realize that it's futile. This catch-22, that justice, I've got to have justice, we've got to kill somebody, make some more prisons. And no, that is not what Jesus wants. Jesus says, I want mercy, not justice. I want mercy. I want love. Love your neighbor. So they're not understanding that, but they're going to try and, as the book of Daniel says, make prophecies come true. And Yahweh is going to have a little bit of success for a moment. But Jesus says, don't worry. It's only going to be a moment, guys. And you'll win your souls through patience. So what's going to happen is Israel is going to they've already been sort of coaxing them. They know that, you push Russia back into a corner and eventually they're going to fight back. And that's what they want. And they're hoping, because see, when they attack Iran, because that's what they plan on doing, they believe, the Bibles talk about this great war of the great day of Yahweh, and he's going to bring all the nations up around his kingdom that's come back out of the peoples and is restored, right? Israel's restored since 1948. And the prophecy says they're going to gather all the nations around his mountain. And there'll be this great war. Well, specifically, it mentions Gog and Magog coming from the north. So they're trying to entice these prophecies to be fulfilled. Now, we don't know if it's humans doing this or, it's probably Satan himself that is inspiring these individuals to do their deeds. But we're going to have a war. It may be a few months or a year or two from now. We don't know how long it's going to take to bubble up and become outright world war annihilation, right? But it'll be total destruction when they claim peace and security. There will be total destruction. And, you'll save your souls by patience. That's what Jesus said. But you've got to have faith and give one of these little ones a cup of water. That's how you won't lose your reward. On the other hand, if you start to get deceived and you start saying, well, Jesus isn't coming, hey, that's what it says in the Bible, but he ain't coming. As our forefathers fell asleep in death, all things continue as they have always continued. He's not coming. And they began to beat go and eat with the confirmed drunkards. Like go back to the old covenant of war and death and famine and slavery, right? That old covenant of the law. And they drink the old covenant. They go back to the old wine. They become a drunkard. And they end up beating their fellow servants. Because that's what the old law wants you to do, is beat one another and judge one another and hate one another and enslave one another. And when they do that, that's called the apostasy. And anyone who does that is going to be making the wrong decisions, friends. This is what we have to understand. This is the time of crisis, and we have to make a decision. And we have to decide if we want to wake up or continue in this game of this catch-22, war and peace and death and life and up and down. And this is the physical world. There's nothing wrong with it, but we have to wake up and realize we're in charge. And the part of that looks bad, the darkness, is just an illusion. You see, it's just an illusion. So, anyway, these deities then are there to tell us how to find that place of peace, to find the Holy Spirit, to find the truth, to wake up unto eternal life, to get our white robes, and to have a place in our heart to sing, and find our soulmate, and have everlasting joy. This is gnosis. This is the gnosis. This is the tree of life. This is the information. And we've only just begun explaining this, guys. We're going to have more and more videos coming with all of this information. And we're going to find everything we need. I'm going to go ahead and go. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Have a good one.